Welcome back to my universe. I'm Lo. Last episode, we talked about why I'm building this podcast, about what is unspoken and still taking up space. But before we can understand why I had to leave, we need to understand what actually saved me when I was breaking. And that was God. Not in the way the church had taught me, not in the way the institution packages it and sells it back to us as control. But God is authenticity. God is alignment. God as the voice inside you that knows the truth, even when everyone around you is performing. This episode is about how I found that God and how that God became the foundation for everything that comes next, including rejecting the systems that tried to contain me. I have spent my whole life trying to understand where my need to break free actually comes from. And I recently realized something on a Friday night in a garage surrounded by the people I love the most. I'm not the first woman in my family who has felt suffocated. I'm just the first one who said it out loud. My maternal lineage are women of intuition, women of magic, women who know things, women who are connected to something bigger than themselves. But they have lived in times and places where that knowing is dangerous, where choosing yourself was not an option, where the cost of authenticity is too high. So they swallowed it. They stayed. They made choices that look like sacrifice and called it duty. But that pressure built. Generation after generation, the pressure built up inside the women of my family. It's like a gas. It accumulates. It has nowhere to go. Until finally, in one generation, it explodes. I'm that generation. I'm the woman where it finally popped. And when I broke open, God was there waiting. I can't tell you exactly when it happened. It wasn't one moment. It was years of trying to fit into a life that was never designed for me. Years of wanting to be the good daughter, the accomplished one that didn't cause any trouble or create any headaches, the one who had it all figured out. Years of building a life that looked right on the outside, but empty on the inside. I mean, I have the job, the title, the respect, but I'm suffocating. And I think I know now that I was living out the patterns of my ancestors. I was choosing the safe path, the respectable path, the path that looked good to other people. But my body was saying no. My body was breaking. My nervous system was screaming for help. And my spirit, it was dying. And in that breaking and that desperation, I had to choose. Are you going to keep performing? Or are you going to find what's real? And it took me this long, but I choose real. When you're broken, when you're desperate, when everything you thought you were is falling apart, that's when you either break completely or you find something to hold on to. I found God, but not the God I was taught about in the local United Methodist Church or Christian megachurch. I found a God that was moving. I found a God that was alive inside of me. A God that spoke in whispers and intuition and in that feeling of connection. I found a God that said, "You are not broken. You are just breaking open." I found a God that didn't ask me to be smaller, that didn't ask me to fit in. It definitely didn't ask me to perform. A God that said, "Be authentically yourself." That's the only prayer I need. And when I started listening to that God, when I started trusting that whisper instead of the institutions, everything shifted. The pressure released. The suffocation eased. I started to breathe because I finally had permission, not from a priest or a pastor or my family, permission from something real, something true, something that moved through me and said, "This is who you are. Trust it." So here's what I understand now that I didn't understand then. Authenticity is spirituality. Being real, being true, being aligned with what you actually know instead of what you've been told to believe. That's the deepest spiritual practice. The church taught me that spirituality was obedience, following rules, that it was about believing what they told me to believe. But God taught me that spirituality is about alignment. It's about listening, about choosing truth, no matter what it costs you. Jesus didn't follow the rules. Jesus chose authenticity. Jesus looked at the institutions of his time and said, "No, thank you." Jesus loved people the way they actually needed to be loved, not the way the system said was acceptable. And then the institution took his story and weaponized it. They took his radical authenticity and turned it into control. But contrary to popular opinion, I believe Jesus was just a man who chose to be chosen, a man who chose to follow his own intuition even when it meant going against everything and everyone around him. And I am just a woman who is choosing to choose differently. I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing my children. I'm choosing authenticity over acceptance. And when I made that choice, when I decided to follow my own intuition instead of the institution, I felt something shift. It was like I was suddenly connected to something that had been running through my family for generations. A lineage of power. A lineage of women who knew things, who felt things, who were connected to something real. My aunt, she is like that. She knows things. She can read people. She is so strong, but she apologizes for it. And my mom, she's got it too. That ability to sense what's true beneath the surface. But she continues to accept the bullshit. And me, I'm the first one in the lineage who said, "No more bullshit. No more apologizing. I'm gonna trust this. I'm gonna build my life around this." I am going to choose myself because I know that's what God is asking me to do. But I only could have done that if I had faith, because I had something real to hold on to. Because this world, the institutions, the systems, the people around us, they work very hard to convince us that our intuition is wrong, that you cannot trust yourself, that you actually do need their permission. But when you have God, real God, the authentic God, your God, you have permission that comes from something bigger than all of that. And that permission is everything. I didn't find this God in church. I didn't find it reading the Bible or listening to sermons. I found it in the trees, in the wind. I found it in meditation, found it in tarot. I found it in paying attention to the cycles of the moon and the patterns of nature. I found it by listening to my body, by paying attention to what made me feel alive and what makes me feel drained. I found it by asking, what is actually true? Not what I was taught was true. Not what would make other people feel comfortable, but what is actually true? And the answer kept coming back. You are part of something bigger. You're connected to everything. You're not separate from God. God isn't in a building. God isn't in a book. God isn't in someone else's interpretation of what is right. God is in you, moving through you, asking you to trust yourself. That's the God I found. That's the spirituality that saved me. And I want to be really clear about something. I'm not anti-Jesus or anti-faith. I am anti-institution. I'm anti-control. I'm anti-using Jesus as an excuse to keep people small. Because Jesus, the real Jesus, the one in the stories, he was just a man who decided to listen to God instead of the system. He looked at the institution of his time, the religious authorities, the rules, the structure, and he said no. He loved the people the institution said were unlovable. He healed on the Sabbath, even though it was against the rules. He hung out with sex workers and tax collectors and people the system rejected. He chose authenticity over acceptance. He chose truth over comfort. And yeah, it cost him. It cost him everything. But that's what choosing yourself costs sometimes. Everything. And I think he knew that. And I think he chose it anyways. So when I say I found God, I found a God that looks like Jesus looked. Radical. Authentic. Unafraid. But I found it in my own way. Through my own path. Not through an institution asking me to believe what they told me to believe. I found it by choosing myself. I said at the beginning that I'm the culmination of generations of women who couldn't choose themselves. And I want to honor that. I want to acknowledge that their sacrifice made it possible for me to have choices they never had. They couldn't speak up. They couldn't leave. They couldn't trust their intuition because it was too dangerous. But they passed something down to me, a knowing, a lineage, a sense that there was something real underneath all the rules and the performances. So I am the woman who finally got to choose. And I'm honoring them by choosing differently. I am choosing authenticity. I'm choosing alignment with what I actually know to be true. I'm choosing myself and my children in a life that is real. And I can only do that because I have spirituality, because I have faith, because I found a God that meets me where I am and asks me to be exactly who I am. Not smaller, not quieter, not more palatable. Just authentically, unapologetically myself. That's what God did for me. That's what authenticity did for me. Everything that comes next, the story of my upbringing, the bullying, the rejection, the climb up the ladder, the realization that I'd built another cage. All of that only makes sense if you understand this first. I have survived because God has my back. I broke free because I found something real to hold on to. I chose myself because I know on a cellular level that God has been asking me to. The institution tried to contain me. The system tried to keep me small. The pressure of generations tried to crush me. But authenticity, real, radical, unapologetic authenticity, that's what saved me. And that's what I'm building this podcast to share. Because I know there are more of us, more women who feel that pressure building, more people who know that the institution is lying, but don't quite know how to trust themselves yet. I want to show you. There is a God that will meet you exactly where you are. There is a spirituality that doesn't require permission from anyone but yourself. There is a way to be authentically you and be held by something real. You just have to choose it. That's my universe for this week. Next time, we're going to go back. We're going to talk about where I came from, about growing up in a white Republican small town as a brilliant brown little girl, about the bullying, the pressure to assimilate, the ways the system tried to make me invisible. And we're going to tell that story with the knowledge that God had my back the whole time. That there was a lineage of power running through my family. That I was never actually alone. Because that's the truth. And the truth is what we're after here. I'm Lo. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. If this landed for you, if you felt something shift, share it with someone who needs to know that authenticity is a spiritual practice. That choosing yourself is choosing God. We'll see you next time. Until then, keep your face to the sunshine and move to the beat of your own drum.